And welcome back to some sort of the Cool Your Jets podcast. We host Ben Blessington and Michael Nania back with another offensive coordinator candidate preview. Yesterday we had Joe Brady. Today we're talking Marcus Brady. And for those who don't know, Marcus Brady was the OC for the Indianapolis Colts. Before that, he was their QB coach for 2 years and an assistant QB coach. Before that, though, he was in the CFL. He actually won a Grey Cup as an OC. So maybe if he comes to the Jets, maybe he can maybe win a Lombardi trophy, add that to the collection as an OC. Am I getting ahead of myself here, Michael? Probably. Nowadays, he's an offensive consultant for the Philadelphia Eagles, so that would make 3 different Eagles coaches that the Jets have had interest in, which is maybe a telling sign of where they're trying to go. I definitely think he is a candidate that is very much in serious contention. I think he was the first guy they interviewed, Michael?
One of the first guys mentioned, I believe. Yeah.
He was definitely one of the first guys mentioned. So this is an important one and one to really think about because he's one of the few guys confirmed to have interviewed, and it was like right away. So with that said, that brings us to Lawrence Owen, who's at Colts_Law on Twitter. He's the host of Colts Law and Believe in Colts. Those 2 podcasts you can find anywhere you listen to podcasts. Lawrence, how's it going, man?
Well, I'm doing. It's kind of, as you know, it's something else to be sitting here during playoffs and not talking about your team playing, as opposed to sit here and get to talk about the Cowboys or the Buccaneers or the Buffalo Bills or something like that. So we're just, as content creators, we're just trying to find things that we can talk about, and definitely coaching searches is a massive part of that at this point in the year.
You don't have to remind us what that is like. We know quite well. You guys sometimes get to have some fun at this time of year, but this is just normal.
I was gonna say at least you've had seasons where you've got to talk about the Colts in the playoffs on the podcast. I mean, I was 10 the last time the Jets were in the playoffs, so it's been a long time. But maybe things are changing. Let's talk about Marcus Brady. Interesting name floated around. Honestly, as a Jets fan, I didn't really know too much about Marcus Brady outside of the fact that he got fired this year, and that whole Colts offensive staff got mixed up. We were just talking about before we started recording, bringing Jeff Saturday in and just putting him in a kind of a tough spot to be an interim coach and clearing out his offensive staff. But before that, I felt like Colts offense, obviously bringing in those veteran quarterbacks year after year, haven't had too much success, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Marcus Brady isn't a great offensive coordinator. Of course, maybe we'll find out over the next 30 minutes. So just generally, like the brief overview, what did Marcus Brady's Colts offense look like? His pass run balance, his aggressiveness, the pace that they're running it at, the positions they prioritize, personnel, like all that stuff, like just the broad kind of overview of what a Marcus Brady offense kind of looks like.
He is very RPO centric. Okay. Now that doesn't mean that is his only stipend that he has. He definitely has a wide range of plays in his playbook, especially with his time with Frank Reich and this offense. He's learned quite a bit. He does like to be a little bit run heavy. Likes to utilize that not just for RPOs, but just flat out play action passing. He likes utilizing everybody on the field, whether it's your running backs, your wide receivers, your tight ends. Everybody gets something. He doesn't want a defense to know where the ball is going at any time. So that's something that you can look forward to with a Marcus Brady. I think that Marcus is getting a little bit of an unfair shake. He kind of became the fall guy, basically, because of the offense that the Indianapolis Colts brought onto the field this past year, when really I don't think it was the play calling fault. I think it had a lot to do with there was holes on the offensive line that was not filled, very bad play on the offensive line, and then just bad quarterback play as well. You mentioned it earlier. The Colts have been on a quarterback carousel for the last 6 years, and there just has not been that stability there for anyone, especially a guy who is responsible. Generally, your offensive coordinators are responsible for writing up the first 3-4 drives of a game, for each and every game. And you got to know your team, you got to know your players, you got to know especially the quarterback and what he's good and what he's not good at. And that's something that I feel like Marcus Brady did a good job. It's just it wasn't executed to the way it needed to be, and that's more on the players than it was Marcus Brady.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. I mean, like, what happened? What was his downfall to be fired in the middle of the season? You were talking to me beforehand about the podcast you do with Rodney McLeod, who's a safety on the Colts, and he gave you kind of some insight into the player's perspective. But I mean, how did we get to this point where Marcus Brady's fired midseason, but yet NFL teams are still interested in bringing him in as an offensive
because
coordinator?
I think that they know he was a fall guy. In that situation, it wasn't just Marcus Brady that was fired. 2 weeks later, the head coach was fired. That's a whole situation where you're looking at and going, man, this offense is just not performing to the expectations. So when you're looked at around the league and you see the situation, it's not like a casual fan. These are owners and GMs and head coaches that are studying film, watching what's going on. They know when a guy is a fall guy and when they're not. And if they're doing a good job or if they're not. And if they are doing a good job and they feel like they're a fall guy, then they're going to bring them in and be like, hey, I like what you did over here. I feel like you got the short end of the stick. Let's try to ramp this up, So I absolutely believe that.
Yeah, and looking more specifically at that scheme, his offense, what they're trying to accomplish, starting with the passing game, how would you say they ran that passing attack under Marcus Brady? What were some of his priorities through the air and some of the concepts that they relied on?
They relied a lot on quick passing schemes, trying to get people in slants, some screens. Occasionally, you'll take your deep shots off the play action and things of that nature, but for the most part, it was about trying to keep the quarterback clean. Now, whether or not that was because Matt Ryan was sitting back there, or if that's his go-to game plans, that's up in the air. But that's pretty much what I seen a lot of. He does do a good job, however, of teaching quarterbacks how to run an RPO system. Matt Ryan had never played the RPO in his entire career in Atlanta, and he came over to the Indianapolis Colts, and Marcus Brady taught him how to keep his eyes downfield as he's handing or faking a handoff, to be able to release the ball quickly to find that open guy, to try to get yak yards, get guys in open space for yak yards. So that's pretty much what Marcus Brady does as an offensive coordinator is quick release yak yard situations. I think he wants something very similar to what you see over there with the San Francisco 49ers, to be honest with you.
That would definitely make him an interesting hire because it would kind of carry over what Mike LaFleur is trying to accomplish, who obviously, like Robert Saleh and much of this Jets coaching staff, came over from that 49ers team. So looking at all the Jets hires or the candidates that they are looking at potentially hiring, a lot of them are outside of that scheme, but it seems like, based on what you're saying, potentially Marcus Brady could carry some of that over. But looking at the run game, how would you describe some of the run schemes, some of the zone versus gap, things like that? How are they trying to run the football under him?
A lot of zone blocking schemes when it comes to running the football. Not a lot of manpower, which is very odd considering that in previous years we were a lot of manpower, man on man blocking schemes. He likes to run a lot of traps. He likes to run wham blocks with tight end. Utilizes his tight ends a ton when it comes to run blocking and things of that nature. I did see something this year that we haven't seen a lot of, and that's a lot of two running back, two tight end formations. He likes the big formations as well. Now that could be, just the fact of what the Colts had personnel wise, but at the same time, he utilized it a ton. And that could also have a lot to do with the RPO, giving him more option, giving the quarterback more options with the football, whether it's, hand the football off on a power dive or, flipping it out on a toss sweep on the same play with the option of either taking off or throwing the football on a quick slant or a drag route or something. So When it comes to running the football, though, a lot of zone scheme is what he likes to run.
And you mentioned a few times that, a lot of the things that he did are different than what you guys were used to seeing with the Colts. But I found that interesting because obviously sometimes that'll happen if you hire a new coordinator from elsewhere. But Marcus Brady has been with the Colts for the past 5 years. He was their quarterbacks coach for the previous 2 years, 2019 to 20, and he was an assistant QB coach in 2018. So with him coming up to offensive coordinator and making some of these changes, doing some of these different things, do you think that he really was inventive in his own way and trying to install this offense? You mentioned, his CFL background. Do you think when he came up to the offensive coordinator spot, he kind of took it into his own reins and built his own thing rather than kind of continuing what he was sort of building or learning while he's in the assistant roles?
Well, I mean, he had some pretty big names to learn from. I think he took a lot of those names while he was with the Colts and their schemes and their styles and kind of mixed it in with his own. Obviously, we all know that he's been under Frank Reich since he's been here with the team. But a lot of people forget Nick Sirianni was his OC, was his immediate boss above him. And you see what's going on in Philly and how Nick Sirianni runs that offense. So I think he took his time. He took his time in the CFL and his little time under Nick Sirianni, and then plus also Frank Reich, and kind of melded it together and picked out what he liked among everything, and then made that his playbook. So it's I think Marcus is one of those guys who's evolving over time with the players and the coaches that he's working with.
It does make sense. We were talking about this in one of the other podcasts that we did, that the Jets are going to look for somebody who matches what Robert Saleh likes to do philosophically. And it does make sense why Marcus Brady was brought in, because a lot of the things that you're talking about, especially the importance of running the football and that 22 personnel, and even, I don't know how apparently Robert Saleh is not too tied to that Kyle Shanahan offense, that zone blocking and whatnot. But it does make sense from a philosophical standpoint why the Jets would be interested in a guy like Marcus Brady. And that kind of brings me to the biggest part of this Jets offseason, especially after they get an OC, is what are they going to do at quarterback? And obviously Derek Carr is the guy who's been kind of floated around. Maybe they can make a trade for Lamar Jackson. Maybe they'll draft somebody. Who knows what they're going to do at quarterback? But what do you think the ideal QB in the Marcus Brady offense kind of looks like? You mentioned the RPO stuff. It seems like he's going to have a quick trigger and know how to run that whole game. But what are some of the other traits you think he would want in a quarterback?
I think a strong arm, somebody can get a ball in a tight window very quickly. Being that, if you want a quick passing game, you want to be able to get that ball out very fast and to your target quickly so that they can be able to do something with that football in space. You're going to want a guy like a Jalen Hurts or a Lamar Jackson, somebody who can run the football but also has a very strong arm. I'm looking at that the Anderson kid coming out of college, who has a very high ceiling but a very low floor. Someone that is a possibility that could end up being that guy in the future, or even possibly like a Tyler Huntley or something of that. I don't like, in all honesty, pocket quarterbacks for a Marcus Brady offense.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think, Carr is kind of that weird blend where he's not a pocket QB. He's definitely not a mobile QB, but he's mobile within the pocket. So, maybe you can run that type of offense. But that's interesting. You do bring up that mobile QB element because as I talked about, I mean, they've interviewed so many coaches with ties to the Eagles offense that maybe that's giving a tell of what they're trying to do. And then you look at the success the Eagles offense has had. A lot of it is predicated on what Jalen Hurts can do with his legs. Maybe a Lamar Jackson trade. Maybe. I think one of the other things that's just so important for an OC is their opening game script. Those 10, 15 plays that they plan out during the week of practice, and then you get to Sundays and you run that. And then depending on how those goes, maybe it went well, maybe it didn't, but you got to make those adjustments in game. How do you feel like Marcus Brady did with his game scripts? Obviously, the production for the Colts offense hasn't been good, but in terms of from a coaching perspective, I mean, how do you feel like those games for it's kind of
that's an issue. That's something that, in all honesty, I think he failed a little bit at. The Colts were not known for jumping out to big leads. Okay. again, that could be because of, just failed execution by the players, bad, the offensive line wasn't playing up to par. The quarterbacks weren't playing up to par all season. Didn't matter who the OC or the play caller was at the time, whether it was Marcus Brady or whether it was I almost said Brandon Frazier. Wow. I'd love to see him on the team just because, but no, Parks Frazier. That's a bad situation with him. I think that's a negative on his resume this past year is, it didn't seem like he was adapting what he was doing with those scripted plays week after week. Obviously you script from game planning. You're doing your research against the defense that you're getting ready to play up against, and you're trying to find what your team does well offensively versus what that team does poorly defensively, and try to find mismatches there. And it never seemed to work out in the Colts' favor while Marcus Brady was making those scripted plays this past season. So that is a negative for Marcus Brady.
What about the flip side of that? Closing games, finishing, clutch drives, you got to have it situations. How do you feel like he finished games?
That's interesting because while Marcus Brady was here, the Colts were a second half team. Like, they did not play well in the first half, but the second half they played very, very good.
Good adjuster.
Yeah, offensively. And then when he left, it flipped. The Colts were really good coming out the gate. Hence, games like
that 30-point comeback,
right? Like the Vikings or say the Cowboys game where they gave up 33 points in the fourth quarter, and just completely collapsed and couldn't score any points against the Cowboys and were turning the football over a ton. Marcus Brady, during his time in Indianapolis as the offensive coordinator, seemed to be able to do a very good job. Now, whether he was calling these plays and making the adjustments or whether that was Frank Reich, I can't give you the information on that. I think it was Frank Reich making those plays, but obviously I do believe that Marcus Brady had a lot of input in that situation, being that, Frank does lean heavily on his offensive coaches and what, their opinions are and stuff. So, yeah, they were a very good second half team while he was the offensive coordinator, as opposed to, a first quarter team.
Yeah, and in addition to starting games and closing games, another very important part, or two important parts of being a good OC, are the clutch situations. Third down, red zone. Can you extend drives? Can you finish drives? That's very important. So how would you summarize his performance on third downs and in the red zone?
Third downs, as long as you're not in the red zone, I think he was a pretty good coach on that situation. The Colts were not good in the red zone this past season. Under him, they were not very good at all. They went for not just third downs, but they were actually pretty good on fourth down as well, overall, offensively. But the red zone situation was poor. A lot of field goals, a lot of ended drives inside the 10-yard line, right? Where they would either go for a field goal or, just turnover on downs or turnovers. That was a big situation as well. In the second half, it was a little bit different. As I said, they tend to score points in the second half under Marcus Brady, but generally that was like fourth quarter, not, the first three quarters. And you need someone who can, be able to be successful on third down and in the red zone 4 quarters of a game.
Yeah, and it's like you said a few times, it was a tough situation there with the Colts. And when you're trying to evaluate a coach, it's always important to, the best we can, it's always tough to do this, but separate him from the talent on the roster and try to compare how much of the talent available to him did he maximize it. So how would you summarize that for Marcus Brady, comparing the results he got out of that team, both of the past 2 seasons while he was there? How would you compare what he got out of the talent that was available to him versus what you would expect from that talent?
Okay, so when I go in this general vicinity, I want to look at play calls versus actual execution on the field.
Right.
Right. And I'm looking at the play calls. I loved the play calls that I saw for the most part from Marcus Brady all season, that he was here. I liked the play calls. Now you're gonna get guys who, look at what happened,
Right.
on the play and go, well, this was awful. How can you say this is? But the play call was the right call for that. It just wasn't executed properly. And I think the play calling wise, I think he did an exceptional job. Now, what the quarterback does with the football after the play is called, that's on the quarterback, not on the offensive coordinator, right? So I think Marcus is a good play caller when it comes to utilizing the weapons that he has. I saw a lot of drags and a lot of crossers and some post routes from our speedster, Paris Campbell, who finally was healthy this year. Something that we didn't see a lot of when he was healthy in years past. The ball just never went to him. I can't tell you how many times I saw Paris Campbell wide open on a post or a corner route, and Matt Ryan throw the ball somewhere completely different, and had the opportunity to hit an easy 40-yard completion, 30-yard completion, but just chose not to do that. I can't put that on Marcus Brady. Marcus Brady had the right play call in that situation. Or, another thing that I was noticing was when it comes to down and distance, right? The right play calls for that. You don't want to see a guy, and we just saw this last in the Vikings Giants game on Sunday. You don't want a guy on 4th down and 8 running a 3-yard out, right? You want everybody getting at least to the sticks or beyond. And I was noticing that quite a bit, where Marcus Brady was always having his guys in the right place at the right time when it came to down and distance.
Yeah, that's fascinating. When you really talk about, that's something Jets fans can relate to, when there's open receivers that just aren't getting hit. And, it is really hard to judge an offensive coordinator when the quarterback play just isn't up to par. But I think one of the things that you can judge an offensive coordinator on, especially in the middle of the season, and maybe this is hard, you let me know, is I think throughout a season, there are traits and there are things that are apparent that your players do well. And can you kind of mold just your system and what you're trying to run to really maximize and get the most out of the players on your roster? I mean, you talk about Paris Campbell running post routes. I mean, maybe that was just the design of the offense, that this Z receiver, this X receiver, he's going to run a post. But maybe it's like, hey, this Paris Campbell kid, he's really fast. Let's put him on these routes that are really going to accentuate the traits that he has. Do you think that Marcus Brady is the type of OC to really try to mold his offense around his players, or do you think he's the type of OC that the Jets have seen from, honestly, ever since I've been watching them, which is, this is our system, and this is the system you're running?
Oh, when it comes to receivers and their routes, he puts the receivers in the right routes. When you got a big bodied 50-50 guy, you're seeing him put on islands a lot, in situations where you'll have like 3 receivers to the right, 1 to the left, and that guy to the left is your 50-50 guy. He's going to be one-on-one, because all the other you forced all the other defensive backs to that other side of the field. So, you're trying to utilize that situation. I like that a lot from him. I feel like watching the play calls, he does put his players in good situations and utilizes their strengths. It's just difficult, as you said, sometimes to evaluate that overall because of the play call, the execution of the players. When your offensive line is not working to its potential and your quarterback play is not working to its potential, you have to look at the all 22. You can't look at the game tape, the broadcast tape at all. And it's awful in that situation because it's hard to get fans to realize at times, hey, you can't look at what happened in the game without looking at the all 22 and say, this guy actually made he put his guys in the right situations. The players didn't execute the way they were supposed to. But you're right. I do believe that for the most part, obviously you're not going to get every play, every every player in the perfect spot every time. But for the most part, I believe that Marcus Brady was very good at utilizing his players' abilities to the maximum potential.
Well, that's definitely good to hear because I think whenever you're talking about hiring a new offensive coordinator, as much as they have their scheme and they're going to bring in their own philosophy, they're also coming to a new roster that they're not going to be able to completely mold in one offseason. So you want to be able to be malleable and adjust to the talent that you do have in place. But going back to some of the things that he was trying to employ with the Colts, like you talked about RPOs and stuff like that. If the Jets were to hire Marcus Brady and they were to make some moves to try to accommodate his scheme and try to build around some of the things he might bring in, what do you think are some of the players, whether it's, the receivers, the O-line, tight ends, running backs, because we talked about quarterback and you mentioned some of the skills there. So if they were to mold some of the other positions to what you expect Marcus Brady might bring in, what type of talent would you want to see at those positions?
Now, I want to make something very clear. I think Marcus Brady obviously, I think that he does lean towards the RPO system and more of your mobile quarterbacks. But we just talked about how, before he was the OC, he was the quarterbacks coach. And as the quarterbacks coach, he had different quarterbacks every single year, and they're all different types of quarterbacks from Carson Wentz, who is a mobile, strong arm quarterback, to a Phillip Rivers or a Matt Ryan, who is just a sit in your pocket and throw the football. And he's able to teach them ways to do what he wants to do. He's able to mold what he could do to them and then mold them a little bit to what he does as well, kind of compromising. But overall, I think what he wants is talent. I think he could fit his scheme to whatever high end talent that the Jets would bring in. Whether it's if you believe that Derek Carr is coming over there, I absolutely believe that he'd be good with a Derek Carr. Or if somehow the Ravens doesn't um, drop that on Lamar Jackson, then and you guys are able to swoop in and get him, I think that would be something that he would probably be fanatic about, is Lamar Jackson.
As would every Jets
Yeah,
fan.
well, I mean, there's Colts fans out here that are like, oh, let's go get Lamar if the Ravens don't get him, locked down. I think a lot of quarterback needy teams are feeling that way as well. But the good thing about him when it comes to players, and it's very similar to what Chris Ballard, the GM for the Colts, likes, and that is just physical traits like that stand out, right? Big wingspans, very, very fast. If you can get someone that runs a very fast 3-cone drill, right? Which means that they can, get in and out of cuts very fast. He'll be able to utilize that to the best ability. You get a guy who's like 6'5" and big and strong receiver, he will utilize that. He wants guys where he could find mismatches. Look at tight ends that the Colts have. We got two tight ends that are over 6'7". Okay. This is, physical traits that Marcus Brady really likes. Something that he could utilize against defenses because, quite frankly, if you have physical traits that is very difficult for a defense to match up against, then he's going to utilize it over and over and over and pound it into the ground until it gets old.
Yeah, well, that is all great to hear because, like we said, the Jets have some talent in place. They got Garrett Wilson, Elijah Moore, Breece Hall. They have guys, so it's not as if they need to totally restructure to an offensive coordinator. So to hear that there's some potential malleability there it definitely makes him intriguing. And I have to be honest, to this point, like we've done a lot of candidate breakdowns to this point. I believe we've done 5 prior to this one, so this is the 6th. This is kind of the one that sold me the most on the potential candidate. But I also want to know about him as much as you can tell us off the field, because that's an important part of being an OC or any coach as well, in addition to the on field. And it's also the toughest for us to kind of gauge on the outside without being in the building. But as far as you know and what you've heard and seen, what can you tell us about how he was off the field, how players related to him, thought of him, any stories you can tell us, just overall what you know about him in the locker room?
All right. So Ben and I was talking before you came on earlier, and before we started recording this. Like I said, I have a co-host who is the starting safety for the Indianapolis Colts and Rodney McLeod. And today we just got done recording a little bit about Marcus Brady and his thoughts about Marcus Brady and what the players and felt about him as a person, and how it was felt when he was let go. And from what Rodney was saying, first off, a lot of the locker room was not happy. They were not happy when Marcus Brady was fired. All right. They liked him a lot as a person. They liked him a lot as a coach. They felt like he ended up kind of being the fall guy in that situation. Think very highly of him. They think that he's a leader of men, a guy who gains the respect of his players around him. They feel like he was, dealt kind of the short end of the stick when it comes to being fired. A lot of the players very, very upset over that. And just a likable guy in general, someone, that players and people can relate to. Offers up some good nuggets when it comes to press conferences and stuff like that. Now, obviously, he doesn't get too in detailed because you can't give away secrets and things of that nature. But he'll answer questions to media or whatnot as open as a coach can answer questions. So overall, I think Marcus as a person is very, very well liked, and was and still is very well liked by the players and the coaches, other coaches that were on this Colts team this past year.
Yeah, and it certainly makes sense as to why he's getting offense coordinator interviews if that's the case. I mean, that does kind of seem like NFL coaches talk. Your reputation carries
Mm-hmm.
around the league, and the fact that the Eagles just came in and swooped him up
Mm-hmm.
immediately after he was fired to bring him in as an offensive consultant also speaks volumes. Overall, when you take a look at Marcus Brady, his strengths, his weaknesses, what are they? I mean, what is his kind of if you're laying it out to Jets fans, what are they getting in an OC in Marcus Brady? What does he do well, and then what does he
I
struggle
think
with?
Marcus Brady does a very good job of utilizing the talent that's around him and formulating plans for an attack, utilizing that offense and the players that are there. Overall, he's very good at adjusting on the fly, especially when it comes to second half adjustments. When halftime comes, he goes in the locker room. He's got time to think, got time to talk to the offensive players, the quarterbacks, and stuff like that, and make those adjustments so that the second half doesn't always necessarily look like the first half. Um, I think he's a negative is, again, I think he's a little more focused on what he wants his team to do when it comes to scripting plays at the beginning of games, rather than what the defense does not do well. So he's more focused on playing his game at the beginning of a game, rather than um, taking the advantage of the weak points of a defense that you're going up against, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, um, because you always want to try to play your game. But if it doesn't work week after week after week, you got to start trying new things, and we weren't seeing that from him. uh he is well liked. Like I said, he is a guy who's not going to lose a locker room. Even when he was terminated, did not lose that locker room. Players still respected him, wanted him to stay there. Had love for the guy. Um, and he's respected not just by the players but the coaches around him. His knowledge of the game, his extensive knowledge of the game, is also a massive bonus because of even though he's only been in the NFL for like 6-7 years, he's had an extensive amount of different types of players, especially quarterbacks, that he's had to work with. So, he could walk in with multiple different types of styles of players and be able to kind of mold what he's got to fit those. So he's very good at that. I think that's probably his best attribute is, he's got so much experience in a little shortened amount of time that he's had in the NFL.
If you're a Jets fan and they hire him, would you be happy based off everything you've said and what you know about him? I mean, should Jets fans be excited about this hire, in your opinion?
I like Marcus Brady. I wish he was still the offensive coordinator for the Indianapolis Colts. I'll be honest with you. I think it was a bad firing. I think there was other assistant coaches that should have been terminated rather than the head coach or the offensive coordinator. But yes, absolutely. I think that Marcus Brady is a guy that will bring in a dynamic to the Jets offense that maybe they just haven't really seen in recent years. So absolutely. I think that Marcus Brady would be a guy that you could get a little bit excited for and a little bit hopeful for with the future if he is hired as the offensive coordinator for the New York Jets.
Well, Lawrence, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. You did a great job because, as Michael said, I think before this podcast, we saw Marcus Brady's name floated around, and then you do the quick research, and you're like, they're hiring the Colts OC that they just fired, and I think it's kind of, you raise some eyebrows, but when you look at what the Jets are looking for philosophically, looking for a guy with experience, he is a guy that makes sense. And even, I like the fact that he's even on the Eagles staff right now, even that he's, maybe gets to go and witness a championship before becoming an OC again. Definitely an intriguing name to watch. And I think somebody who is a strong contender for this position. So we really appreciate you taking time out of your day to talk with us about him. We've tried really hard the guests we have on, we try to, find the smartest, best just football guys to talk with in each candidate. And so even if you're not a Colts fan, I hope our listeners shoot you a follow because I love just following smart NFL people. So my entire Twitter timeline is just good football takes. And because I have enough of the bad ones sprinkled in with the Jets fans that I follow. No offense. Lawrence, where can our listeners find you on Twitter, and where can they listen to you?
Well, obviously on Twitter and Instagram, you can follow me at Colts_law. You can find the Believe in Colts podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts, and you can see my Colts Law podcast and the Believe in Colts podcast on my channel, Lawrence Owen, which is obviously, you can see right there, my name. It's very easy to spell, or you can just type in Believe in Colts or Colts Law, and it's everywhere. You just type it in Google and bam, you'll see it instantaneously. So I appreciate you having me on. This was very interesting.
Yeah, I gotta say, as when LaFleur first got fired, there was a moment where I was like, God, did they make the wrong choice? Questioning. But then I was like, oh, content. We got all these OC candidate pods we can do. So it's always fun to do these. Lawrence, thank you so much. Really appreciate you. Jets fans, let us know what you think. Tweet us at CYJ Pod on Twitter. Comment in the YouTube below. What do you think? Marcus Brady? Did Lawrence sell you? Or is your opinion of Marcus higher? Would you be excited if he is indeed the hire for the New York Jets? Let us know. With that said, everybody have a great day and go Jets.